Hey, did you know that over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but haven't subscribed yet? If you enjoy these true trucker horror stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It's free and really motivates us to keep the stories rolling. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's stories. Welcome to the Sleep Haunt, where truth drifts through the dark and fear rides beside every traveler. Tonight, we bring you 6 true, most chilling trucker horror stories, real encounters from forgotten highways, empty motels, and miles where the silence felt far too alive. Before we begin, we've set a goal. Let's reach 100 likes on this video. Tap that like button now and help us keep the wheels turning through the dark. And share your city and the time you're listening in the comments. Let's see who's still awake out there on the road. Now, settle in, breathe slow, and listen. The road remembers everything. Story number 1. He had been driving since sunset, cruising a long, quiet stretch of highway stacked with winter air and no real winter yet. The sky carried that dry cold that found its way into every seam. He was alone in the cab, engine humming, a reefer unit cycling with a measured hush behind him. The trailer held apples bound for a warehouse that slept under sodium lamps. His name was Cole, and the night was one of those undemanding nights where the road is an easy ribbon and the clock behaves. An hour past midnight, signs began to appear for a rest area. Cotton Ridge, 2 miles. Cotton Ridge, 1 mile. He glanced at the digital display on his dash and at the electronic logs that suggested a break soon. A stop would be good. He flexed his fingers and watched matted frost trace a silver outline on his mirrors. A whisper came through the CB. Nothing strong, just the usual midnight hush. When the exit for the rest area came up, the design looked new, poured concrete edges and reflective posts, the sort of clean that only holds for a couple of seasons. He swung off the highway and felt the tires thump lightly over the grooves. The sign said "Open" in block letters. Sodium lamps cast a honeyed glow over empty picnic tables, a vending machine corner, a line of trees that moved a little though there was no wind he could feel. He rolled in slow, checking for other rigs. There were a few passenger cars, older-looking square shapes, big chrome. Their windows were shut, and every windshield had a thin frost. It had been a mild evening, not really frost weather, but it didn't strike him as important. He pulled into the truck side and let the rig settle along the painted line. He left the engine idling, reefer purring, and listened for anything out of place. The first odd thing was the way sound seemed softer here. Even the idle felt padded, like someone had draped a blanket over the world. He cracked the window and the night air snuck in with a faint sweetness. The smell of apples stronger than it should have been for sealed pallets. The vending machines hummed quietly across the lot. A notice board near the bathrooms held a faded map, its colors sapped by too many summers. He did a quick walk around, boots tapping the pavement in even steps. He ran a hand over a strap and felt the tautness, perfect. The trailer's cold breath was steady. On the far end, under a light that flickered at a lazy rhythm, a man stood near a picnic table. He wore a jacket and a brimmed cap. He raised a hand in a slow, cautious wave. Cole nodded back out of habit. The man's wave didn't stop. It repeated itself in the same measured sweep, almost like a loop. He climbed back into the cab and had just pulled the door when the CB crackled, not with white noise but with a voice, familiar enough to snap his head around. "Flatlander, you still with us?" The old handle slid across his skin like a ghost. Only one person had ever used it for him. Years ago, he'd run nights with a seasoned driver named Harold. Harold had retired, bought a little house with a garden, and only called once in a while around holidays. Cole thumbed the mic. "Go ahead, break." Static answered. Then, after a long breath, "Don't kill the engine." "Not there." The voice wore Harold's quiet authority with a tired edge. Cole held the microphone. "Copy. Say again." The radio gave him the sound of a distant storm, but he didn't hear thunder. He leaned back, watching the lot. The old cars didn't move. The man in the brimmed cap turned and paced 3 steps, then turned again and lifted his hand in that same deliberate wave. The lamp over him flicked to a steady shine, then to a faint tremble, then quiet again. Cole rubbed his thumb over the mic's press to talk. Maybe a prank, maybe some long skip on a clear night, radio waves bending strange. He reached for the key anyway, meaning only to test the idea. but a small unease crawled up from his limbs and settled near his throat. The last words had nudged something old inside him. He'd once lost a battery in winter because he'd trusted a quiet lot with a pretty sign. He left the motor running, dash lights glowing gentle red. In the reefer's rhythm came a shift. Tap, 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 pause, tap. A pattern that seemed to glance off his own pulse and come back again. He shut his eyes and counted. The sound settled into even beats. He told himself that pallets shift, that cold air contracts, that thin metal ticks just like old pipes in an older house. He checked the time. 2:17. The digits felt stern and rectangular in the dash. He stretched and watched his breath fog the driver's side window and then fade. He realized he hadn't heard a semi or car enter the lot since he'd pulled in. The highway beyond the trees had gone redless. No taillights. No headlight spray through the gaps. Another voice came through the CB, higher pitch and calm. Cotton Ridge is closed, driver. You're past exit 99, correct? He frowned and answered. Negative. I'm parked up at Cotton Ridge now. Sign says open. Silence then. No, sir. Been closed 3 months. Road crew at daylight. He looked at the board again. The open letters were clean. He thought of walking over to the building to see if the bathrooms were locked. He did not relish leaving the cabin. He looked across the hood, over the dash, and watched the man in the cap again. The man took 3 steps. The lamp above fluttered and steadied. The hand rose. Somewhere in the trees came the faintest sound, like the soft run of water over stones, though there was no stream on the map. The apple's cold scent threaded through the cab again, a little stronger, almost like a chilled store aisle. He turned off the climate fan to listen. Without the fan, the CB's low breath grew more present, like a sleeping animal in the dark. Flatlander, the first voice said again, wearing Harold's shape. If you're stubborn, do what you always do. Follow the center line, and don't use your mirrors. Cole swallowed, and the taste was metallic, like a coin. He clicked the mic. If this is a joke, it's not funny. The reply took a while. When it arrived, it sounded more tired than before. No jokes. Put her in gear. Easy does it. He looked once more at the lot. He didn't like leaving a place without knowing why. He had a careful nature, a habit of tidying things up, of finishing a loop. But he also had the long years that teach a driver when to lean toward the simple action that prevents a story from becoming something that can't be untold. He set his foot on the brake, shifted, and edged forward. Eyes down the hood, over the line of sight, where his lights painted the pavement in clear color. The vending machines flickered. For a second, their fluorescent tubes brightened, and he could read the faded labels inside. Cola in red letters. A bag of chips, with a brand that hadn't used that logo in 2 decades. He passed them without looking too hard. The man in the cap kept to his slow pattern. Cole kept to his own foot gentle, wheel steady, eyes on the cut of pavement that would return him to the little ramp, to the highway and its empty calm. Just before the turn, the CB carried a third voice, warm, practiced, official. Driver, if you're in Cotton Ridge, carefully exit. Do not linger. There are barricades up, but some folks move them. Follow my voice to the right, then merge. Do not look in your mirrors until the merge is complete. The tone made it easy to obey. He focused on the forward frame and steered where the gentle voice suggested. He did not check the mirrors. He listened to his tires, talked to the pavement. He heard the reefer's pulse even and cool. The ramp came up. He took it, feeling the little sway of the trailer behind. He reached the merge and felt the old tug in his neck. The instinct to glance at the blind spot. He kept his eyes forward like a person holding a candle against a draft. The highway accepted him with a soft rumble and spread itself in a flat silver ribbon. He kept speed modest and let the night take him. At the first mile marker, the dash clock flicked. 2:17 became 2:41 in a soft blink, like a skipped heartbeat. He didn't feel time pass. He didn't feel behind or ahead. He just felt the engine humming again at its usual volume. The reefer returned to a friendly whisper. In the mirror, without meaning to, he saw a dark seam of trees and a fenced rectangle with a sign turned sideways. If there was a rest area behind him, it was sleeping without lights. The CB's official voice returned. "You clear?" He said yes. "Copy. Cotton Ridge is closed tonight. We've had calls from drivers who think it's not. You're in good shape. Keep it moving." He asked, careful not to sound nervous. "You on duty there?" The answer came with paper rustle in the background. "Volunteer group. Monitors the channels. Forgive the surprise. Drive safe." He clicked twice, a habit of thanks. The radio returned to its usual hush. He drove. Trees thinned. The plains opened, and the stars reassembled themselves in cold points. He rolled his shoulders and felt a space inside him unclench. He told himself he would log his break at a recognized truck stop farther down, with coffee, bright doors, and other drivers moving around like slow planets. He did not notice the scent leave until a long sweep of road later. Apples, that ghost of produce aisle chill, slipped out of the cab. In its place, the truck's usual smells returned. Warm plastic, a little oil, coffee gone old in the thermos lid. At dawn, in the soft, slow light, he pulled into a modern stop where pink sky reflected in tanker sides. He fueled, did a routine check, and feeling almost foolish, he asked the cashier if she knew anything about Cotton Ridge. "Closed," she said without looking up. "Has been for a while. They're tearing out the old plumbing and whatever was behind the tile." He said he'd seen a sign that looked brand new. She smiled a little. "They never took the highway signs down. Somebody keeps polishing them. I think the county's waiting on a shipment. People complain. It confuses travelers." He found a patch of quiet and slid open his dashcam footage out of curiosity. The small screen showed the lot, but the timestamp stuttered. Where there ought to have been a full half hour, there were fewer minutes. He saw his own headlights move in measured arcs, the vending machines flaring for a breath, the picnic canopy. He enlarged the view and watched the shape of a man under a light. The cap brim cut the glow into a clean line. The wave repeated in a patient arc. Then the view went soft for a moment, the light shimmering as if heat came up from warm pavement. When the shot sharpened again, the picnic area was empty. He closed the file. He rested his head back and let the early sun warm the windshield. He thought of Harold and the shape of his voice through a speaker. He dug through his contacts and found an old number. It rang and rang. When it picked up, the voice was familiar and older. They talked about gardens and the price of diesel and a nephew learning stick shift. He tried to slip in a question about last night without sounding like he had something that might spook his own memory. Harold laughed a little and said, "Funny you say Cotton Ridge. Bad luck spot. Used to make me sleepy just seeing the sign. I'd keep rolling. That place? I don't know. Some lots are just wrong." He didn't mention any incident. He didn't say anything heavy. He just said, "Keep it moving when you can, kid." Later, after delivery, he searched for news out of habit. He found only a small notice. Renovations, replacement of fixtures, a line about updating the information board. Nothing more. A driver's forum thread had a few tired jokes about closed bathrooms and fast soda machines. One comment mentioned a man in a cap who would wave at anyone willing to risk a night there. Someone else said that guy had been friendly and helped them jump a battery years back when snow was light, and the lamps hummed, and everyone made it home fine. He didn't settle on an answer. He didn't need one. The road doesn't always deliver answers. It asks for attention, for small rituals, for simple caution. From then on, he kept a rule that had not been a rule before. He passed rest areas that felt too quiet, even when the sign said open and clean. He went toward coffee and bustle and bright floors. Through the rest of winter and into the spring, he heard the CB talk about traffic and weather. And he never again heard the old handle ride the static in that easy way. Once in early fall, on another run with apples, he parked under a hard blue sky to tighten straps. The reefer ticked in a pattern that reached his attention, and for a heartbeat the rhythm made him think of that slow wave under sodium lamps. He looked around at the bright lot with its ordinary people and the chatter of morning radio from someone's open door. He felt the world right itself like a picture frame adjusted on a wall. He finished what needed doing and rolled out. People who drive long nights keep small personal maps of places that ask for quiet and caution. Cotton Ridge took its place on his just a tiny symbol, a penciled X. A reminder that some exits belong to another time and should be respected with a steady hand, an idling engine, and an open lane back to the wider road. Story number 2. Ria was 3 hours into the climb when the transponder chirped a crisp, polite beep that meant a way station wanted a word. The grade ahead lifted through pine and dark shale. A slow stairway cut into mountain. Rain had turned to a hush of mist, and the road stripes glowed like quiet bones in the beam of her headlights. She eased off the throttle, felt the rig settle into that patient pull that let the governor breathe, and glanced at the tiny display clipped on her dash. It flashed a simple instruction: pull in. She frowned. Up here, the old Hollow Ridge station had been shuttered when the new scales went down in the valley. There had been an email about it, a bulletin from the company pinned to a corkboard by the fuel desk. Hollow Ridge decommissioned. Use the lower station. She knew the bulletin better than most, because she'd tucked a corner of it under the clip that always snagged on her jacket. Still, the chirp was clear. She didn't like ignoring it. The job was a braid of routines, and a small part of her preferred to keep those routines tight. The sign appeared out of the mist as she rounded a curve. Open, in patient green letters. A pale arrow blinked. She slowed, blinkers ticking with companionable rhythm, and took the narrow ramp that split from the highway like a calm thought. Reflectors winked on the post's amber, then white, and her tires thumped softly over expansion joints. Pine needled the air with a clean smell that seemed to sharpen as the shoulder fell away and the way station spread out below, a rectangle of wet pavement ringed with low fences. The place looked older than memory suggested. Its cinderblock office had a wide window with a metal shutter rolled halfway up. A single fluorescent tube flickered and steadied, making the glass shine like a sheet of cold water. The big analog scale face, mounted on a tall post where the road widened, glowed with a ghostly green dial that swept numbers instead of digits. She had seen those dials in photographs, in places her mentors told stories about, not in active use on a highway believed to be up to date. A voice lifted from a tinny speaker somewhere above the scale. Northbound driver, approach platform. Stop with steer axle on the first mark. Set brake. It wasn't a CB voice, not the human chatter of Channel 19, but the official speaker tone that lived in intercoms. Calm. Neutral. Practiced. She rolled up, watching for the little white lines painted across the concrete. They were bright. Fresh, even. The rain softened to a fine drizzle that pebbled the hood. She stopped, set the brake, and listened. The engine murmured. The speaker clicked as if someone lifted a finger from a microphone and put it back again. The big dial's needle trembled, then crept, then settled. The motion felt physical, like something in the ground decided to speak to something in the air through her steel and rubber. Hold, said the voice. On the right, under the awning of the office, sat a plastic chair. A paper coffee cup rested on the low wall beside it. A ring of water around its base. No one sat in the chair. On the other side of the lot, a brightness swam in a puddle, reflecting the sign's patient green. The needle twitched again. A narrow slot next to the dial coughed, and a paper slip unfurled, stopped, then slid into a tray like a receipt. Ria hesitated, then set the brake harder and opened her window an inch. The night air licked in, cool and pine sour, with a whisper of creosote from the old railroad bed that paralleled the highway a mile downslope. She reached and took the slip. It had a logo she didn't recognize, a stylized shield with a mountain line drawn through it. The kind of design that went out of style around the time tape cassettes did. It also had her company name, spelled correctly, and her unit number. The date stamped on it wasn't today. It was the same month and day. But the year printed in soft ink was back a number she didn't like. Gross weight inconsistent, the slip said in a thin font. Roughway required. Proceed around loop. Driver, back off the platform, the speaker said. Wide right around the house. Return when the arrow turns green. She put it in gear, eased off, and followed the painted arrows. The loop took her by a caged area where cones were stacked like orange beehives, and a measuring pole lay leaned against the fence. The rain's hush grew softer, as if the world had been padded. Past the office window, she looked for movement. None. The coffee cup on the wall had a lid now, where it hadn't before. Back around, arrow green. She pulled forward again. Same instruction. Set brake. The needle trembled. This time she kept her eyes on the dial, watched it make its careful journey, and thought of a clock with only one hand, always waiting. Another slip coughed out. The date was off again. A different year this time, not far, but wrong. The field for attendant had a faint name typed into it, Marlene S. She tried her phone. The signal icon wavered and steadied. She hit the company contact. A ringtone didn't ring. Instead, the phone played a soft tone, like wind chimes, and went quiet. She spoke anyway, just in case the wrong sound meant the right connection. Pulled into Hollow Ridge by transponder. Station looks old school, getting relay instructions, requesting guidance. Her voice sounded composed, more composed than she felt. She listened. The phone did not hold a voice. It held the small hush of a disconnected stage before a play begins. Relay indicates variation, the speaker said gently. Please pull off platform. Circle and return. Rhea put the second slip next to the first. The thin paper felt cool against her palm. She backed, looped, and eased forward again, steering to step where the lines wanted her wheels. Her eyes traced the small details. A moth circling the fluorescent tube, a damp fingerprint on the scale house glass, a posted sheet with regulations whose text softened through the rain. She counted the seconds between the speaker's clicks, as if counting might anchor time. It did not. The needle twitched, rose, and fell with all the patience of a metronome. She was on the fourth pass when she noticed the rail by the office had a deep scratch that looked older than the building, like a memory dug into metal. She was on the fifth when she realized the coffee cup no longer had a lid, and the lid rested on the chair seat, upside down, collecting a neat circle of rain. On the sixth, she reached for the wiper stalk to flick a mark, a little ritual, to say to herself, "This time is different," and realized her hand had left a smudge on the plastic, 3 fingerprints that didn't look like they should stay if time were unwinding. They did. Each loop, the smudge stared back. Bay 3 is available for inspection, the speaker offered without pressure. If you prefer, drop trailer for axle check. Rhea breathed out slowly. She pictured the seal on the trailer door, the paperwork that traveled like a quiet promise from one set of hands to another. The words "do not break." Seal lived in her bones. She spoke aloud, not into any microphone, but into the cab, because sometimes saying a thing made it stronger. "No drop. Stay coupled." "Understood," said the voice. And if a machine could sound approving, it did, lightly. The seventh slip slid into the tray. Rhea didn't take it. She watched it lie there like a small fish caught in a shallow pool. The slot made a soft whir again and tried to feed another, then stopped. In the screen reflection, she saw her own face, pale beneath the cap, and behind her the empty lot, and beyond that, the stacks of cones that did not move unless a hand did it. A tiny itch rode up the back of her neck. She did not like that the slips had years wrong. She did not like that her phone's time had stopped changing while the dash clock ticked on in obedient minutes. She did not like that her transponder, which had told her to come in, now sat silent on its clip, its little green eye watching her like a cat that had made up its mind. She pressed the window switch and leaned out a little to better hear the speaker. "Hollow Ridge, this is Unit 78 Lima. If you need anything further, say it plain." The speaker clicked. "Plain. Keep moving," it said. And then, "Plain. Balance is a conversation, not a number." It was a kind of thing an old scale man would have said in a friendly way when the day had gone quiet, a motto in a voice that didn't belong to any person she had met. Rhea put the truck in gear. The green arrow hung steady. She rolled onto the platform one last time and stopped short, just a foot before the mark. The needle did not move. The speaker did not ask her to nudge forward. "Proceed to exit," it said, quieter. She did. She eased around the loop, past the office. As the rig straightened by the window, she looked in. A bulletin board hung with curling notes occupied the far wall. Though the glass and rain blurred them, she could make out lines of typed names on old slips tacked under pushpins. Some had a corner torn where a pin had been moved and put back again. One name brushed her memory not because she knew the person, but because she had seen it on a small memorial sign by the guardrail on the western downgrade, the kind the state puts up for a driver lost. She kept her eyes steady on the path ahead and let the thought pass like a narrow shoulder. When she reached the merge lane back to the highway, the ramp looked longer than it had when she'd come down. Reflective posts stood like a polite honor guard, their bases licked with moss. Rhea kept her speed low. In her mirror, for a few heartbeats, the lot behind her appeared to hold more trucks than she had seen, pale shapes with no lights, arranged in neat rows. She controlled her eyes, looked forward again, and saw only wet pavement unrolling to where the highway made a curve that felt familiar. The transponder chirped as her steer tires found the texture of the highway. This time, the tiny display gave a different message. Bypass granted. Have a safe trip. The chirp had that ordinary charm again, like a glance from a friend across a room full of strangers. Rhea let air out, not a laugh, not relief exactly, but the breath a person remembers to take after a long-held pose. She drove. The pass shouldered away. Pines opened to a slope of scrub and rock, where the rain softened into a drizzle that made the world reflective and clear by turns. The highway unwound like ribbon from a clean spool. She kept her speed on the good side of modest and left her transponder's volume turned down low. In the valley, the new way station awaited with bright LED signs and a smooth, chiseled geometry that felt like a bank lobby married to a police station. Open, said its sign. All trucks. She obeyed. The place behaved exactly as a station should. She rolled across a glass-smooth platform, watched a digital screen reassure her with numbers that matched the math in her head, took a clean printed receipt with today's date, and exchanged a wave with a living attendant in a neon vest who slid her a smile like a warm coin. She asked her a question at the window while holding out her license in its plastic sleeve. Hollow Ridge showing is open on the way up. That decommission get reversed? The attendant shook her head. Groundwater's got the old coils singing when fog sets in. They spook the readers sometimes. We get bleeps when nobody ought to be bleeping. Keep moving if the valley's open. Folks call from up there once in a while. All we can tell them is the same thing, you know, old stations fenced and waiting on a bulldozer or a grant or both. Anyone still in the office? Rhea asked, gesturing toward the mountain with a chin tilt. The attendant smiled a little. A not unkind smile you see on someone who's been asked a thing that lives between folklore and maintenance. No staff up there, she said. Not for a long time. The CB came alive with chatter about a minor backup where a deer had decided to argue with the concept of a road. Voices traded warnings and jokes, and the kind of companionable weather talk that passes miles like thread through a needle. Rhea rolled on, the green fields stretching on either side, puddles catching an early hint of moon. She felt the residue of the station slough off the way rain slips from a jacket when a person steps under cover. At a rest pullout with a long view and a trash bin that didn't smell yet like it was earning its keep, she checked her dash cam out of habit. The clip from the pass played smooth her approach, the office window bright and lonely, the dial's slow sweep. The audio carried the speaker voice, but under it, barely audible without headphones, was a second, softer layer, a loop of a phrase, probably the system's idle prompt, that repeated with long gaps like the breathing of a sleeping building. Please pull forward. Please pull forward. Please. She took a photo of the slips and sent them to herself. The dates, wrong as they were, lined up in a way only shadows line up close enough to make a shape, far enough to keep it from being something you could name. She labeled the message with a word: balance. On the next run through the mountains, she took the valley route anyway, as all drivers were meant to do. Rain rode the shoulders again, slanting in the kind of thin, even sweep that makes 1,000 tiny craters and puddles. The old station was easy to miss when the fog sat low. She almost did miss it until a breeze hustled the mist aside and revealed the chain-link fence gone dull with a film of air. A sign had been bolted to it, closed future site of wildlife corridor. The big analog dial stood behind like a face at a window in a house where no one lived. Traffic drifted by in a steady hum. Rhea pulled onto a patch of gravel, left the engine idling, and watched the little rectangle for a minute, long enough to see a plastic ribbon twist on a post, and the grasses beyond lean, then relax as if a hand had brushed them. She took a sealed coffee from the cubby and set it on the low concrete barrier by the gate. Silly maybe, but it felt like the right sort of polite. She didn't wait. She didn't look back too long. The trick with certain places is to give them a nod and keep moving, the way one might greet an aparted elder in a town square, and not demand a story they weren't offering. Back on the highway, a hawk held still in the air for a moment, riding the geometry of wind. Her transponder sat quiet and green, a tiny witness to a world where machines talk to machines, And sometimes, through them, something older speaks in the spaces between. Story number 3. Jonah rolled off the interstate at 2:41 a.m., blinkers clicking like a quiet metronome in the fog. The exit sign for Riverbend Industrial Park glowed soft as a nightlight. Beneath the overpass, moisture wept from concrete seams, and the orange wash of sodium lamps made the mist look like it had a pulse. He eased the rig through a four-way where no other traffic bothered to breathe, past a row of warehouses that slept under flat roofs and humming lights, and turned into a long drive signed Pioneer Cold Storage. The guard shack was a glass cube with a heater humming and a metal drawer that slid out to meet a driver's paperwork. No guard sat inside. Instead, a laminated sign pointed to a kiosk built into the wall. Scan. His QR code lit the screen, and the speaker crackled in a milder version of an intercom voice. Door assignment. 47. Chalk wheels. Stay in cab during loading. Do not break seal without instruction. A thin strip of paper fed out with a soft whine. The print a little light like the ink ribbon had gone tired years ago. He smiled despite himself. Some places had money for bright new systems and crisp paper spitting out with barcodes sharp as razor cuts. Other places had working habits older than their upgrades. The gate arm went up, a white and red bar that looked like a pointer for a classroom map. Jonah slipped the truck forward into a yard drawn in lines and rectangles. Dock doors in a row, bumpers black and scuffed, the painted numbers crisp but chipped at the corners. 47 sat near the middle, flanked by 46 and 48, which had their dock lights set to red, a low glow that touched the wet pavement and made it shine. Steam bled from a roof vent in a steady ribbon. The yard was quiet but not empty. Somewhere to his left, a sound echoed, beep, beep. Not the harsh, modern alarm of a forklift, but a softer note, almost a small bell, the kind used on older lifts, polite and insistent at the same time. Jonah slid the window down a crack and let the cool come in. The air tasted like metal and citrus cleaner. He lined the truck up, rolling slow, clutch and brake, moving in a rhythm long practiced, and backed toward 47. The dock light stayed red. The bumpers felt the kiss of his trailer first. A gentle push, a tremor through the frame. He set the brake, dropped the air, and felt the rig settle into the posture of waiting. He climbed down long enough to place chocks at the driver's side tandem. The yellow triangle bit the wet concrete with an honest bite. He checked the seal on the doors intact, number matching his bill. A neon-lettered placard on the dock wall read, "Stop sign here when light is red." The sign on the neighboring door had a coffee ring dead in its center, like someone rested a cup in the exact same spot over and over for years. He returned to the cab, clicked the reefer set point check 28 degrees, hold and pulled the window down to listen. The dock plate engaged with a low hydraulic sigh. The truck rocked as something heavy came aboard. For a second, he expected the clamor of a lift, the thud of pallets settling against deckboards, the bark of radio chatter from inside the building. Instead, the sounds came wrapped in distance, muffled as if curtains hung between him and the work. He could hear a voice now and then, not distinct words, more the cadence of people who know the job and speak without heat. Forklift tires made a sibilant hiss. The bell chimed again, not perfect in timing, like a metronome whose spring needs a touch. He watched the yard. A yard goat sat idling by the far fence, its amber strobes frozen in the mist as if they were painted on the air. No one sat in its cab. A stray ribbon of caution tape clung to the chain link, fluttering a tiny dance. The analog clock mounted above the dock offices read 3:01. He knew better than to trust such clocks. Their batteries gave out, their hands stuck. Still, the second hand moved in a lazy sweep that looked convincing enough to measure a minute. The red dock light blinked once off, on, off, then steadied to red again. Jonah felt his attention stretch, soften, then tune like a radio. Little details rose and fell in his peripheral vision. The "Employees must wash hands" sign inside the open office door featured an illustration with sleeves rolled to the elbow, the way older posters did. A corkboard held a faded calendar with a photo of an orchard in full blossom. The month printed across the top was the current one, but the year in the corner had a smudge. He thumbed through his paperwork. The purchase order numbers aligned. He sent a simple text to dispatch, docked 47, Riverbend, red light. Will advise when green. The three dots that meant someone was typing appeared, then vanished. He felt the slight bump of a pallet placed forward near his neck under the sleeper. He breathed with the motion, the way a person unconsciously moves with a trained sway to keep balance even at rest. Through the windshield, an office light flared. A shadow crossed the frosted window hair piled up. A person maybe 5'5". A plant behind them shaped like a palm. He expected to see the door open, the clipboard appear, the nod toward his cab. The door did not open. The shadow paused, turned as if to glance at the clock, then slid away from the window, like mist erasing itself. The bell chimed again. He realized it never chimed twice the same way. Sometimes fast, sometimes with a pause that breathed, like someone waiting at a corner and looking both ways out of habit though the road holds no cars. 3 pallets in, he could feel the weight. He checked the trailer scale gauge, watched the needle ease into a zone that made sense for a partial. 4 pallets. 5. The reefer clicked and settled into a steady hum. He nudged the vents closed another half-notch just for a tighter hold. A shift in the driver's seat had him comfortable in a posture that could pretend to be sleep without achieving it. Somewhere beyond the dock door, a voice called numbers. 3 of 9. 4 of 9. If there had been a radio, Jonah couldn't hear it. He turned his cab radio down until only the weather band's soft hiss remained. The forecast promised clear after dawn. A paper rustled. He glanced to the edge of the driver's window. The slide-out drawer from the guard shack, the one he'd left without touching after it remained empty, rested on its rail again, as if he'd never seen it move. Inside lay a roll of old visitor stickers and a stub of pencil. The tiny graphite point had been sharpened with a pocket knife. He looked back at the dock. The red light cooled the wet pavement with color. He uncapped his pen, wrote in the margin of his BOL. Arrived 2:56. He added a line under it for depart. The truck rocked, affable as an old chair. He thought of low winter sun over farm fields, how it set frost, steaming off furrows when morning finally arrived. He thought of the earliest places he'd loaded, the handmade safety posters, the way a dock crew leader with 30 years could call a young driver boss and mean it kindly. He didn't remember closing his eyes. A hush came over the yard that was not sleep, but something like it, a held breath while a page is turned. When he opened them again, the red dock light burned brighter, like a saturated dot on a screen. The analog clock read 3:27. The forklifts, if they moved, did so under blankets of sound. He stretched his neck, eased his shoulders back against the seat, and took a sip of coffee that had cooled to merely warm. The light went green. No bump of a last pallet, no final thud of a load bar being set. No human voice hollered, "You're good," from inside. The dock light simply changed, as if it had decided on its own. Jonah set the brake harder, slid the window down an inch more, and waited for the expected knock on the driver's door. Knocks and signatures lived at this point in the dance. None arrived. Instead, a clipboard rested in his passenger seat, where nothing had been a minute earlier. He blinked. His doors were locked. His windows were cracked barely. The clipboard bore a sheaf of papers, a neat overlay of plastic, and a blue stamp bleeding into the page with wet ink. Pioneer Cold Storage, Riverbend Receiving. The name on the signature line looked tidy, Old English loops and a practical tale. Marla Greeley, Night Receiver. Timeout. 3:30, 3 a.m. Seal applied, 842173. His eyes went to the numbers on the little seal tag glinting in the mirror. 842173. Indeed, crimped tight. He had a moment then. The kind of moment when the skin knows something a mind will not accept yet. The sort of moment when a person sets a foot onto a stair and finds it an inch lower than expected. He checked the trailer scale gauge. The needle sat where it ought to sit if 9 pallets stood secure and even. He checked the reefer temp. The hold was steady, colder air pooling around the intake as it does when the cargo itself breathes chill back into the space. He eased away from the bumpers. The dock plate lifted with a cough. The light swung from green to red, as if dismissing him kindly. Jonah pulled forward into the yard, angled the truck to clear, and straightened. In his mirror, he saw 47's door slide down like a lid closing over a jar. The office window held no shadow. The bell chime had gone to memory. At the gate, the arm lifted before he stopped. The kiosk blinked a goodbye that reminded him of a screensaver. He rolled into the street, and the town received him with the sound of his own tires and a far-off train singing a thin line against the damp. He kept his speed gentle and his thoughts in order. He did not announce to the CB anything other than the lane he intended to occupy. He set his hazard for a moment while he arranged the BOL on his clipboard and slid the signed copy into the sleeve. The stamp ink left a faint ghost on the page beneath where it hadn't dried before it met paper. He set the pen cap with a small click that felt like a point. By sunrise, he was 2 counties away, and the world woke slowly in fields and cul-de-sacs. He fueled at an open travel center, where the cashier had a jar of peppermint sticks on the counter and a calendar that showed a lighthouse under a summer sky. Another driver in line, his jacket damp at the shoulders, noticed the facility name on Jonah's bill. Riverbend, huh? You lucky. They're quick when they're open. Jonah smiled. Door 47, in and out. The driver's expression did something small. 47's taped off. Been like that since they started the floor work. All of us been hitting 31 and 32. Night receiving's been day. Only for months. Maybe they just opened it, Jonah said. He wanted to leave it there. He did. On the road again, daylight thinned the strangeness and yet did not erase it. He stopped at a wide turnout with a view of a river wrinkling under breeze and opened his dashcam app just to see. The clip from the yard played back with steady angles and ordinary hum. He watched 47's light burn red, then green. He watched the door open, then closed. The timestamp never flickered. In the background, the camera's microphone had caught faint sound. Not the harsh beep of a lift, a bell. A small, well-mannered bell. He glanced at the signature again, Marla Greeley. The name did not ring anything inside his head, not like the bell from the lift. He sent a photo of the signed BOL to dispatch anyway and typed, "Loaded quick. Green at 3:33. Good to roll. Thanks." The reply came clean. "Copy. Nice work." Mid-morning, the phone rang. Unknown local number. He clicked to speaker. A woman's voice, efficient and not unfriendly. "This is Shelley at Pioneer Cold Storage. Just a quick question. You loaded out a 47 overnight?" "That's what my assignment said," Jonah answered. "We don't have 47 online. Not at night. The dock's in repair. We saw your PO close in the system, and the scan log stamped it at 3:33, but..." A paper shuffled near her. "That terminal isn't plugged into anything. We don't use that stamp anymore. Could you send me a picture of your paperwork?" He did. The dots of the message sent swam and lined themselves up. On the other end, quiet. Then a soft exhale. "That's our stamp. Haven't seen that stamp in years. And that signature..." The voice caught on a professional edge, then steadied. "It's real neat. Marla had handwriting like that. She trained half the day shift." "You're saying this is wrong?" "I'm saying it's accurate," she said, and Jonah appreciated the answer's shape. "Accurate in a way that doesn't match my schedule. Don't worry, your load is good. We'll make it right on our end. If you pass by later in the week, swing through. I'd like to look at your recorder, hear what it picked up." He didn't promise. Freight had its own ideas about who went, where, when. But his map tilted him near Riverbend again, after delivery. The day was bright and clean, with a stiff breeze that pushed flags straight. He had half an hour before his next pickup window. He turned into the same long drive, parked in a visitor slot, and walked to the office with his hat in his hand, like he was about to ask a favor. The glass door smelled like cleaner and something cold from the freezer side. Shelley met him at the counter, hair pulled back, eyes practical and kind. She took the photo of the BOL in her messages and set it next to a dusty stamp kept in a drawer with old keys. The rubber matched the print exactly. The stamp's handle had a notch where a wedding ring had chipped it once upon a time. "We keep it for history, I guess," she said, not quite apologetic. "We use printed acknowledgments now. Would you mind if we listen to your dash audio?" They did headphones split, each ear taking one side of the stereo. The bell chimed. The pallet hiss. A voice counting 3 of 9 arrived faint, as if spoken from the heel of a hand. Shelley's face changed in the way faces do when overhearing a melody someone used to hum while sorting cartons. "That's the old lift's bell," she said. "We retired it when the floor project started, and that voice..." Her sentence tapered into a hallway of thought. Marla was always counting out loud. "Is she around?" Jonah asked, because the question hung there. "She's not on staff," Shelley answered simply. "Not for a long time. Happens that way. People move. Places change. The job keeps going." Jonah nodded. He did not ask anything else. He had learned a rhythm in his life that respected the quiet between facts. Shelley slid his photo back across the counter, like handing a note to a friend in school. "If you come at night again," she said, and her tone was practical, not mystical. "Use 31 or 32. 47 still taped off. The sensors play tricks. We'd rather not confuse anyone." He left a thermos cup of coffee on the corner of the counter, cap tightened, a small thanks for time. In the yard, a maintenance tech stood on a ladder at 47, a strip of caution tape looped between hand and rail. The tech glanced down, gave a wave that carried a "hey there" more than a hello, and went back to work. The dock's red light winked, as if a wire sighed. A breeze moved the tape, and it lifted and settled with a sound like a ribbon pulled across a gift box. On the next run past Riverbend, weeks later, Jonah wasn't assigned there, but the route brought him alongside the industrial park near midnight. The windshield swam with a low ground mist, not thick, but enough to turn lights into halos. He saw the cold storage buildings face like a ship at anchor. He slowed to yard speed as he passed the gate, habit turning his head toward the docks. The numbers sat like a row of teeth, even and waiting. 47's light glowed red without a truck in it. For a second, in the mirror's angle, he thought he saw a small square of white, like paper, resting on the step of a loading dock ladder. It might have been nothing more than a rag left behind by maintenance. He drove on. A mile later, his transponder chirped for a bridge weight check ahead. A normal sound in a world he knew well. He clicked the radio on low. Somewhere down the dial, a late-night disc jockey mentioned an old song about keeping the wheels turning. Jonah felt the cab, a familiar room around him, gauges easy, glass clean, coffee warm. The night had its usual muscle and its usual mercy. He didn't decide what had happened. Truckers tell themselves the simplest story that lets the job get done. Still, he kept the paper with the neat signature tucked under the clear flap in his logbook for a while. Once, parked nose out at a prairie rest pullout, he took it out and noticed a faint smudge on the margin he hadn't seen before. Pencil, not pen. It was a small loop drawn with a sure hand, the kind a person sketches absently during a phone call. It looked like the number 4, with a tail. He put the paper back gently. He eased the seat into a position that let his back rest. He watched night move along the prairie, as if it were a slow river, and he were a barge with a patient engine. Some places belong to day, some to night, and some stand in the seam and do the work that both require. He promised himself, for no reason other than the pleasantness of it, that if he were ever sent again to Riverbend long after midnight, he would bring a sleeve of the peppermint sticks the cashier kept and leave them in a cup by a door. Just likely enough, someone would find them, and that was a fine truth in a world stitched together by hands most drivers never see. Story number 4. Lila reached the river just as the storm let go of the night. Rain broke into a fine mist that drifted off the asphalt like breath in cold air. The new suspension bridge, sleek cables, bright pylons. A proud sweep stood ahead with its deck lit like a runway. Then the message board flashed a different plan. Full closure 2000, 200-400. Use marked detour. She checked the dash clock. 2:08 a.m. The route on the in-cab screen redrew itself politely, a green thread peeling from the main line and looping toward the older span that ran parallel a mile downriver. She had heard of the old bridge. Everyone had. Steel truss, low clearance, wood plank sound under tires, though it wasn't wood anymore, just the memory of it. The company's note, a tiny line in a dispatch that skimmed across her phone at midday, had mentioned work on the new span, night cruise, a simple detour. She signaled and eased into the right lane, the tired storm wipers making a last soft sweep before she clicked them off. The road down to the river ran through flat land, where cornfields turned to low wetlands. Fog banked in shallow bowls, the kind that look like lakes until the wind picks them up and sets them elsewhere. Her headlights wrote clean shapes on the reflective posts. The placard signs were old, but the temporary ones were fresh, arrows that glowed like they believed in themselves. Dieter trucks okay. She followed them through a curve, where willow trees grew shaggy and patient. The river breathed a wider chill, a hint of iron and silt. At the approach to the old truss, a small work zone assembled itself out of cones, a portable arrow board, and a pickup idling with a steady amber beacon revolving in old-fashioned circles instead of strobing. A sign on the bed said pilot. The text was hand-lettered beneath the official decal, neat and careful. Lila rolled to a stop behind it and dropped her window a few inches. The knight stepped into the cab, smelling like wet leaves. The pickup door opened. A person stepped out in a state-issued vest, its reflective strips catching the beacon and tossing it back. She couldn't see their face, only the careful way they moved, every gesture precise as a drill. They didn't walk up to her window. They stood near the pickup's tail and lifted a wand. Not the hard, sharp red of modern batons, this one glowed a soft green, like a bottle glass that remembered daylight. The wand made a circle, and then a small forward tilt. Go ahead. Keep close. Low gear. The universal language of night work. Her CB had been quiet. She thumbed it to a low channel anyway out of habit. The pilot's voice came through, clean and unhurried. Tractor. Trailer northbound? Copy? Copy, she said. Unit 236 on the detour. I've got 13-2 on the rack, 80,000 gross. 13-2 will clear if you hold center. One truck at a time. Don't stop mid-span. If anything feels odd, it'll be whined through the frame and the deck grating talking back. Keep your eyes on my tailboard. Do not crowd. You're fine. The voice was like a flat river, calm, a little tired. The kind that had spoken into radios for years. No chatter behind it. No bleed from other conversations. Just that tone and her own engine. She eased forward, lining her steer tires with the pilot's tracks. The truck settled into that low-gear growl that feels like a big animal choosing to be gentle. The bridge lifted ahead of her, a geometry of triangles and rivets, painted a shade of green that no one uses anymore, the kind that eats light and gives it back softly. The clearance bar 13.6 hung at the entrance and wore a lace of spiderwebs slicked with mist. Her breath lived higher in her chest for a moment, then settled when she remembered the pilot's words. Center. Keep it steady. The river below was full, not angry, just wide and awake from the storm. Under her tires, the deck grating sang a tone that rose and fell with speed, a long, even sound. The steel worked under wind, the old kind of creak that comes from a structure built to move a little as it carries weight. The pilot's beacon turned with a pace from another decade. Around. Pause. Around. The green wand made a slow cadence to match. 25 and steady, the voice said. You're an arrow. Just keep the same thought. Leela nodded, though no one could see. The first arch took her. Steel cross. Bracing made patterns of shadows on the hood. Rain beaded on the wiper arms and trembled but didn't fall. In the mirror, the world behind her narrowed to a sculpture of diagonal lines and fog. In front, the pickup rolled as if its tires were not touching pavement at all, just riding a memory of the road late into the night. The middle of the river spread under the second arch. Far to the right, a barge's running lights made two tiny stars that slid and held and slid again as the current took them. The noise of her own engine lifted and laid itself down in time with the grating's hum. A wind pushed sideways once, a steady hand rather than a shove. The pilot's taillights bobbed very slightly and then held dead center. The green wand made its small encouragement. Her dash clock winked. 2:14 became 2:11, and then returned to 2:12 as if its seconds had skipped on a record. She watched the needle of the tatch instead, which told her a story her foot already knew. Another wind came through the arches, a longer breath, the kind that moves through trees in waves. When it passed by the open lattice, it made a low, hollow tone, like someone rubbing a thumb on the rim of a glass. The tone found and matched the hum under the tires for a few seconds, then drifted away. The pilot spoke again, as if to keep the world simple. You might see lights below to the left. Old causeway, eyes up here. She didn't look, but she could feel brightness shifting in the corner of her vision, a different pattern than river lights. Not the barges, not the shore lamps of houses, something else. She kept her eyes on the tailboard. The green wand drew a line that could have been a string pulled taut. Third arch, the voice said. Little bump where the deck meets the span. It's normal. 1, 2. The bump came on 2. A tiny step in the road that made the engine note drop a hair and return. Lila's hands held the wheel with the steadiness of someone reading a long paragraph and not losing the line. The hum under the tires kept her awake and calm at once. She inhaled shallowly, not out of fear, but instinct, the way the body makes itself small when crossing a narrow place. She had crossed a lot of bridges. She liked them. She liked how they held both strength and mercy. The old bridge felt like a person holding out a hand without saying their name. The pickup pulled them forward at a pace that felt almost like a heartbeat. The fog thinned toward the far shore. The arches leaped lower, shorter. The pilot's beacon painted the lattice, and then broke the paint away with its movement. The radio made a small, honest crackle, and then the voice again. "You're clear on height. 2 more frames. After the second, keep straight. Do not take the first ramp right. Even if it looks easy, stay with me." "Copy," she said. She watched the shape of the exit open. The first ramp right did look easy. Wide, gently curved, with clean stripes, and a new sign face. Her route display wanted that ramp, drew its green thread that way. The pilot did not go to it. The pickup held center and carried on to a narrower exit a few hundred feet beyond, where the sign was older and leaned a little and declared, "To 17 North Old Town Trucks, okay." She followed. The narrow ramp's guardrail felt very close. Wet leaves clung to its posts. Somewhere, a frog made a sound like a rubber band plucked once and left to vibrate. The intersection at the top of the incline had a 4-way blink. The pilot rolled through the stop line and eased to the shoulder. The radio clicked. "You're across. I'll hold traffic while you take the northbound. Once you're on, set your cruise at 45 until the mile 3 marker. The pavement has dips. After mile 3, you can bring her back to highway rhythm." He said it like he'd said it 1,000 times. Lila checked both ways, turned, and climbed. The pickup's beacon faded behind. In her mirror, the old bridge became a piece of small machinery in the fog, something careful and precise doing its quiet job far away. The 2-lane northward felt empty, open. Her tires found the dips the pilot mentioned and rode them without complaint. The fog here hung in higher strips like ribbons on a stand. At mile marker 2, she glanced down and found herself not exactly trusting the dash clock. The sky in the east hinted at a shade lighter than black. Mile 3 arrived, marker scuffed and leaning. She let the governor have a little more leash. The truck stretched comfortably. In the mirror, a last flash of amber turned once and went away as if someone put a lid on a jar. She left the old road and joined the highway again, where the new span sent lanes wide and slow under its cables. The closure sign faced the other direction. The bypass signs here were different, brighter, more certain, declaring their plan. She pulled into a turnout with a view of light on water and put her hazards on while she checked the load straps in the beam of her own lights. Everything neat, everything snug. She took a breath, heard it leave her ribs, and thumbed the radio to say a thing drivers say when they've been given a hand. Pilot on the old truss, appreciate the lead. Silence, but not the heavy kind. A small foreign voice joined then, a thick accent and a chuckle behind it. "You get the green wand too, driver?" "Affirmative. You had a good night. Last week they told me take the new ramp, walk me into a closed gate. Spent 20 minutes making a circle back. But the old pilot, he always right." Lila smiled and didn't ask if the other driver had seen a face. She didn't say she hadn't, that she had only noticed the neatness of the gestures, the way the wand never shook. She rolled back onto the highway and let the miles come the way. Miles due steady, unshowy, sure. Near sunrise, she stopped at a little diner with a wide counter and a pie case that the morning sun made into jewelry. Truck parking hugged the side. Inside, a framed black and white photo hung above the coffee pots. It showed the old bridge, brand new then, a car on it so square it could have been a cabinet with wheels. A man in a brimmed cap stood by a pickup with Pilot hand-painted on its door. He held a short baton with a cap over its end. Under the photo, a card read, "East Bank Bridge Opening Day, 1949. The person refilling coffee wore a name tag that said Elroy and a smile with years behind it. He saw her looking at the photo and nodded. Different kind of busy back then. Who runs the detour at night? Lila asked. Pulled me over the old steel. Elroy tipped his head. County. Unless the county forgets it's the county, then usually it's just one of the night crew who knows how people get turned around. You get a green light? A green wand, she said. Soft color, like bottle glass. Elroy's smile deepened, then leveled. They used those before the city swapped out flashers. I worked that pilot truck summers in 82, 83, 84. Green was go. Red was stop. Simple enough to remember at 3 in the morning. He glanced toward the back room, where the radio murmured weather. They'll tear it down one day, he said of the old bridge, not with bitterness, just a kind of resignation. I'll miss hearing it sing in a south wind. She finished her eggs, left exact change, and a folded extra for the person who would hit their 5th hour before noon, and stepped back into the morning. The river looked different in daylight. The new span cast clean shadows. The old truss looked smaller, like a toy a careful child might build twice. On her way out of the parking lot, she noticed a small glass display by the door. Local history. Nothing grand, just things kept so they wouldn't evaporate. Under glass lay a green lantern with a bulb the size of a thumb. Its label read, Traffic Wand, East Bank Bridge, retired. She turned north and clocked back into freight. Hauling is a series of promises kept at the right place and the right time. She delivered the modular kitchen equipment to a school that still smelled like fresh paint and waxed floors, accepted a signature from a foreman who held a door open with his foot while he wrote, and drove into another set of miles, as afternoon swung toward evening. A couple days later, crossing the river again in daylight on the new bridge, she looked down and saw a patch of darker water where the old causeway had been. It went nowhere now. The level had risen when the dam was built, and the old road lived under ripples. She thought of the pilot's voice saying, "You might see lights below." She kept her eyes forward and followed the new span's easy curve. That night, parked at a turnout with a row of junipers and a view of a field where the wind made the grass seem to breathe, she cleaned her windshield the way she always did, tight circles with a soft cloth, until glass stopped being a thing and became the idea of nothing. In the reflection for a second, behind the glow of her marker lights, she thought she saw a small movement of green, just a flick, like a nod. It was probably the signal repeater down the road, or a firefly, or nothing at all that a person needs to talk about. When drivers tell it later, they say the old bridge is a patient tool that sometimes takes up its role again when the tidy plan hiccups. They say a pilot truck with a slow amber beacon helps a rig across when the new lights are turned off for paint or cable work. They say, follow the center, keep the lane, don't stop where the wind plays a note through the frame, and whatever you do, don't take the first easy ramp. A different road is waiting, a smaller one, quiet and correct. As for the green wand, if it appears, look at that. Let it lead. When the lane widens and the fog thins and the clock returns to its job, the way forward requires nothing more than daylight and a foot that knows what steady means. Lila carried on with that in her pocket, not as a story to tell on the radio, not as a thing that would change even 1 mile of how she worked, just as a small truth, that not everything new erases what was good before it, and some nights the old tools come back, do their job with care, and let the river learn your name only as a note passing through. Story number 5. Amaya took the high desert route because her delivery window the next morning made more sense if she slept a few hours in the basin and rolled before dawn. The highway cut across scrub and low mesas, like a drawn line. Stars were bright enough to seem close to the windshield, and the moon had not yet hauled itself over the rim of the world. Her dash lights were turned down low so the cab felt like a cocoon with a horizon on all sides. She liked having voices in the dark, but not the kind that kept up a fight with their own noise. Talk radio went off after midnight. Music she kept for afternoons when fatigue made the world flat. At night, she tuned to the weather band. The NOAA voice was steady, without being bossy. It gave her temperatures she would never step into and lake levels she would never see. But it was a heartbeat she could set on the far edge of hearing and forget until it mattered. When the digital display ticked past 1:22 a.m., her finger found the weather preset. The speaker made the familiar wire spring hiss, then the clipped code tones that mean, An important thing is about to be said. Then a voice, a little softer than usual, slipped into the cab. This is Redwood Butte Weather Radio, serving the Cimarron Basin and High Mesa counties, it said. Conditions along the Dry Lake Road remain variable. For northbound traffic on the interstate, expect patchy ground fog and intermittent dust sheets after mile 61. Exercise caution near Cotton Draw. Avoid sudden stops when entering low visibility. If able, reduce speed to 35 and follow the center reflectors. Amaya blinked. Redwood Butte wasn't one of the names she knew. The radio always announced call signs, frequencies, a list of towns. She knew Fishhook Ridge, Paloma Ridge, Blue Arroyo. Redwood Butte? The frequency was the same she always used. She glanced at her map out of habit where she had scribbled tower locations in pencil. No Redwood Butte. She told herself maybe they'd installed a new transmitter. The government changed things without asking. She rolled past mile 57. The road here ran straight, with a low fence on the left keeping cattle honest, and on the right, an old frontage road that faded in and out like a memory, a strip of cracked blacktop that sometimes paralleled the highway and sometimes ended in scrub. The wind had quieted. The air smelled plain, a mix of rubber, dust, and the hint of whatever plant had flowers at night. The weather voice continued in its calm. Special statement for high-profile vehicles. Maintain lane during cross-shift events. Do not use shoulder markers for guidance in dust. Center reflectors are newest. Cotton Draw has light construction in the median. Equipment is parked, lights off. Please avoid hard braking at the bottom. She had done this stretch often enough to picture Cotton Draw, a shallow dip that collected tumbleweeds and the odd soda can, a name bigger than the cut it described. She eased off the cruise by a little. The engine sound changed the way a cat changes the shape of its body when it settles down, barely but enough you notice if you live with it. At mile 60, the world made a polite mistake. The reflectors ahead of her should have lined up like sequins on a dress. Instead, they bent in a small, shimmering wave, as if someone had run a hand across the fabric. The air looked thick with something she couldn't name yet. She clicked her fog lamps on low. They cut a faint rectangle into the night and filled with small floating pieces, dust, light enough to ride on invisible currents, heavy enough to fall when the wind let go. She remembered other nights in other states when snow had done this, but this wasn't snow. It had no sparkle, no scent. It was the memory of riverbed ground, lifted by an old habit of wind. The weather voice gave its code tones again, then went on. Ground fog forms from drainage off the mesa slopes. Dry lake silt is active in sheets 6 to 12 feet thick. Be advised. The first sheet is at mile 60. 1. Reduce to 35. Stay in lane. If you must stop, do not stop under the overpass at Cotton Draw. She had never stopped under that overpass, not for anything. Still, the specificity caught the back of her neck. The CB stirred with life as two drivers farther back traded updates on a scale house hours away, then quieted. The highway around her seemed to hear something and prepare. The first sheet came like a curtain a theater might lower only halfway. She entered the edge and felt the world soften. Sound changed. The rumble of tires went fuzzy, the way a voice sounds to someone underwater. The reflectors at the center line remained strong. The shoulder markers to her right went faint. Then stranger, they seemed a half-step slow, as if she had outrun their intention. She held the wheel light, but absolute. 35 felt like dignity, not fear. When she emerged, the air tasted like talc, nothing and something all at once. The radio clicked. Subsequent sheet at mile 62. Maintain 35. Do not follow taillights if they appear to drift. If you see an exit to the right immediately after Cotton Draw, ignore it. Old ramp. No pavement beyond the lip. Amaya knew that old ramp. Years ago it had connected to the Rampley frontage road. Then a washout took it and never gave it back. The sign had been removed, but the shape remained. Vultures sometimes sat on the posts like punctuation marks in the day. She swallowed, not nervous so much as careful. The second sheet rose up like a fog bank in miniature. The center reflectors held their tiny fires. She went through. The third sheet met her at the lip of Cotton Draw. The world narrowed to a tunnel of her own lights and the reflectors that braided through it. A thing moved on her left behind the guardrail, a construction backhoe, parked with its arm down like a folded elbow. No lights. The radio had said it would be there. She let her foot rest on restraint. A mile later, out of the dust, a set of taillights appeared ahead. They swayed gently at first, then with an odd cadence, like a person weaving on a bicycle as they go up a hill to feel their own balance. The instinct to match another vehicle's pace tugged at her. The weather voice, as if hearing the tug, spoke again. Do not pace vehicles with unsteady rear lights. Some lighting in this corridor is 20 years old and mounted on springs that bounce in wind. If glare appears on the right, it is reflection from salt patches. Do not use them to judge distance. She kept her own lane and let the other truck, if it was a truck, be its own problem. When she came abreast in the next clearing of air, she reached for the radio. Habit. Courtesy. You okay up there, driver? What answer didn't come from the CB. It came from somewhere between the weather radio and the night itself, a thin flick of sound like a record with a scratch. Then, silence. The taillights ahead corrected and steadied, as if a hand had found center again. The sheet broke apart. Stars reappeared. She rolled under the cotton draw overpass without a second thought, the space echoing her motor with a deep, round hum. On the right, the old ramp showed itself. A concrete lip, like a jaw, with one tooth missing. Someone had set a reflective barrel in its mouth, and the barrel's stripe made a rectangle of brightness in the dust before the dust took it. Next event at 63, the weather voice said, and then uncharacteristically, you're doing fine. It wasn't a tone the official voice usually used. She looked at the radio as if it could have eyebrows. The last of the dust came like a sigh. It laid itself across the lanes and then lifted. The air cleared to the kind of night where you can hear the hum of power lines miles away if you put your window down. The radio returned to ordinary programming. Forecasts for counties she'd leave by dawn. A reading of river gauges. The day's high and low temperatures in towns that sounded like stories themselves. Amaya let her shoulders drop a fraction, a relaxation no one else would have noticed. She nudged the crews back up. Across the basin, the line of mesas wore their moonlessness like a kind of wisdom. At a truck stop called Blanco Springs, a low island of light with diesel islands, and a diner that believed in pancakes at any hour, she pulled in to top off and give her eyes a change of scene. Inside, the floor was mopped to a soft shine, and a cooler hummed with energy drinks behind clean glass. The cashier wore a denim jacket with a stitched-on patch that read Joe, and he had the look of a person who had counted the quiet hours often and found them friendly. She paid and asked without making it a big thing, Redwood Butte Weather Radio new? Joe paused. Haven't heard that name out loud in a while, he said, in the tone of someone reaching for a memory on a shelf and finding it where he left it. Tower on the Ridge burned in a lightning strike about 12 years back. They replaced it with Paloma Ridge and Fish Hook. Everybody retunes and life goes on. It came in tonight, she said. Same frequency as Paloma. Sounded official as a badge. Joe's expression ran through surprise without losing its shape. He kept his voice low, not conspiratorial, just respectful of the hour. Long time ago, Redwood Butte made it farther than it should on certain nights. We used to get it here when the air lay down flat. Folks liked it. Sounded like a friend who knows the roads. You sure you weren't just catching Paloma with a nick in the broadcast? They were working the lines today. Might have bleed. Maybe, she said. It knew about dust and cotton draw. Joe smiled a little into his shoulder. Cotton draw is a dust magnet whenever the basin's got no moon and the wind figures it can boss folks. Good to go through slow. Good to keep out from under that overpass. You stay safe, driver. Back in the cab, she ran the dash cam review not because she wanted proof, but because she liked seeing the world she'd just passed in a small square. The footage showed the dust sheets lifting like pale curtains and falling in again. On the audio track, under the rumble of her engine, the weather voice spoke its calm counsel. When it said, "You're doing fine," it didn't sound like a recording dropped in by a person who didn't know where in the minute it would land. It sounded in time with her own heartbeat. She slept at the lot's far end, where a broken light left a patch of darkness on purpose. The night lay quiet. A train sang beyond the scrub once, and then respected the hour. In that soft sleep that comes to people whose homes move, she dreamed not of weather but of lines painted, reflected, imagined, and hands she could not see laying reflectors down just ahead of her as she went. Morning came clean. The sky was that washed blue that makes distant mountains seem closer. She delivered the goods to a farm co-op where the forklifts wore sun-soaked paint, took a friendly signature, and found herself with a sliver of time to give back to the highway. On her way out of the basin, a narrow dirt road climbed toward a low ridge. A small sign pointing up it read, "Radio site authorized vehicles only." She pulled over at the bottom, where a turnout held 3 survey stakes and a patch of old riveted metal that might have been a door in another life. She looked up. On the ridge, a stub of tower stood, not even as tall as a silo, with guy wires gone loose and waving their broken songs in the breeze. She wouldn't drive up. The road wasn't hers. She took a picture from where she stood and zoomed in. The base of the tower had a plaque no one could read from here. She imagined it naming the way the voice had traveled long distances, the way people used to stand near a radio to hear if their own town would be called. That afternoon, when the sun had turned the world into a bright, decisive place, she tuned to Paloma Ridge. The voice there was clear and a little sharper, like a suit that hasn't had time to breathe yet. It gave forecasts, spoke of relative humidity, told her the highway temperature would reach 90. It did not say her name. It did not need to. It did not tell her what to do when the dust lifted itself from the old lake bed. You can memorize 1,000 miles of road and still be surprised by a mile that behaves like it's new. Amaya thought of that when she rolled past mile 60 again 2 weeks later, this time under a high moon that made the desert silver. The air was quiet. She touched the weather preset just to hear company. The radio hesitated, clicked, and brought up a voice that was both familiar and not. "This is Redwood Butte Weather Radio, serving the Cimarron Basin," it said. "Advisory for bridges east of the dry lake in the hours around midnight. Watch for thin frost where sprinklers run late. If you feel the steering lighten, do not correct too fast. Carry steady across. For eastbound traffic, 3-mile construction zone beginning at marker 41. Pilot car in use. Expect brief hold. Day crews will flag." It was not a Sunday voice, not a ghost voice, not a human voice disguised as a machine. It was just the weather, listening and speaking in a way that felt like it could hear the road itself. She drove on. At marker 41, a flagger stood with the calm posture of someone who knows the job and trusts it. The pilot car took 3 rigs past fresh asphalt and set them back on their way. The frost never developed. The voice did not come again. On her next pass through Blanco Springs, she asked Joe about the plaque up at the ridge. He laughed a little and wiped his hands on a bar towel, like the habit lived in him. "Only says what you expect. Dedicated to the volunteers who kept the transmitter alive through the long winters. A list of names, a year. People used to go up there with a thermos and a battery bank and make sure the feed never hiccuped. They say one winter the road glazed so bad, a driver on his way to Santa Fe kept hearing his town's name and thought the weatherman had a grudge. Turned out, the voice was just reading the list of service towns. Folks make stories from whatever they need to hold on to. In her off time, parked under a cottonwood where her eyes could rest on something green, she replayed the clip of the dust night again. The sound of her own engine skipped a half beat where she'd lightened off at Cotton Draw. The voice still said the thing it did at the end, the gentle human thing that wasn't in any script. She didn't need it to be anything other than what it was. A small help in a sliver of dark, a thread that caught, a reminder that the road offered kindness sometimes in the body of timing, advice, habit. Drivers, pass such things along in a kind of code. She didn't say Redwood Butte on the radio. She didn't tell folks to listen for a station that was supposed to be gone. She only said, when the desert makes a curtain, pick the slow truth and keep on the center pins. Don't stop under an overpass if you can help it. Don't chase someone else's sway. Trust your own wheel hands. And if you hear a voice telling you to take it easy, it might be your own brain getting smarter in a hurry. It might be a man on a ridge with an old board and a generator. It might be the air talking through wires. No need to pin it down. By the time summer tipped toward fall, the ground around the dry lake held the even color of a field waiting for rain. The nights came through cooler. One midnight, as she approached the basin with the window cracked to let in the kind of air that smells like sage, she turned the weather band down low and listened to the usual list of towns, the cadence of forecasts. Between 2 sentences, for the space of a breath, a second voice under the first said, Barely. Headlights on low. You're doing fine. And then it was gone. She left her lights on low even though the world wanted high. The animals here knew the difference and stayed in their grasses. The road unrolled with its steady benevolence. Somewhere in the distance, a red beacon on a new cell tower winked like a patient eye, and far beyond that, a ridge where once a voice rode farther than it should had become a line on the horizon that didn't require endless explanation to keep doing what it did. A quiet job in a quiet place, remembered by the people who passed and liked feeling less alone for a mile or two. Story number 6. Malik liked the turnpike at night, when the toll plazas glowed like small cities and the road between them felt measured and fair. He was hauling paper rolls massive, white, secured like sleeping giants against the trailer walls, and he'd planned his drive to reach the river county after midnight, when traffic slid into one long, calm breath. The transponder clipped near the visor blinked a contented green. The cab smelled faintly of coffee and the paper's clean starch. Clouds hung low and unhurried. Rain had moved through earlier and left the asphalt dark and glassy. He passed under a sign that told all rigs about the next service plaza and kept going. He had water and a thermos and the kind of quiet readiness that makes the dark feel like a companion rather than an opponent. The first odd note came as he rolled up on the Old Orchard interchange. Overhead, the electronic message board stuttered, then showed a line that didn't match the season. Cash lanes only at next toll as transponders offline. Exact change. He frowned softly. He had not heard a systems bulletin. But the Turnpike Authority was famous for sudden maintenance windows that lived in the small hours. He eased off the crew's 2 ticks, slid a hand to the cup of coins he kept for scales and small-town meters, and felt the weight of quarters in his palm. Ahead, the toll plaza rose from the road like a stage set multiple lanes, peaked canopies, a sweep of concrete made warm-looking by sodium lamps. The newer plazas wore blue-white LEDs and glass-like bank lobbies. This one was older. The canopy had a greenish tint that lived in the paint. Above each lane, lenses blinked red or green. A metal sign over lane 5 read, "Exact change 1.25 inches of font he hadn't seen in a while, the numbers looking more like clock hands than printed type." He took lane 5. The booth was unattended. No glass slid back. No attendant's hand in a glove reached for a ticket. Instead, a small intercom box blinked to life and gave a gentle tone. "Commercial northbound, proceed to deposit," a voice said clear as a bell with that halfway between human and system quality highway advisory radios have. "Keep wheels centered in the trough. After the gate, follow the cones for a crossover. Maintain 25. He dipped his chin once, reflex to a voice that knew its own business. He slid 2 quarters, then another 3 into the stainless cup bowl. The coins landed with the old-fashioned chime that exact change lanes taught everyone before electric gates learned to trust one another. The light clicked green. The arm lifted. As he rolled, a thermal printer to the right gave a small sneeze, and a slip of paper crawled into a tray. He snagged it through the open window without thinking. It had the Turnpike Authority's crest, but not the newer arrow and shield design. It was older blocky letters, a little wreath, the kind of thing found on patches in framed sepia photos in district offices. Entry, Old Orchard Plaza. Class, 5-axle. Time, 3:19 amperes. M. The year printed at the top made him blink. It was correct on the month and day. The year was not this one. He put the slip on the dash and told himself he'd ask a dispatcher later about ticket stock. It wasn't strange for an authority to burn through old boxes of forms with odd dates printed wrong. Governments like not wasting paper. Past the gate, cones braided traffic into 2 lanes. Big arrow boards faced him with their chevrons flowing left. He took the merge slow, watching the lane lines pick up and move aside like they were being slid with a ruler. A rope of blue reflectors ran down the center line between the cones blue, not the more common white or yellow bright in the wet. He had seen blue used to mark fire hydrants in some places. He had never driven a work zone guided by them. They glowed the way a lake glows in late afternoon. "Commercial northbound. Enter crossover," the same voice said in his speaker. It didn't ride the CB. It lived in a frequency he recognized by habit. He thumbed to AM 1610 on the dash radio and heard the same tone, the same calm on the highway advisory band. "Single lane 2. Way traffic for 1 mile. No stopping on the causeway. If you see taillights on the closed lane, do not pace. Proceed 25. The word causeway reset his picture of the place. He had thought of the low bridge that followed this stretch as a normal span across the river. He'd forgotten the long, flat mile beyond, where water pooled in wide pans on either side, and cattails made summer's corners into autumns. The rain had made a skin over it all. Even in darkness, he could tell. The air smelled like wet stone and a hint of creosote from old timbers in the cut before the water. He kept his eyes on the arrowboard ahead, its bulbs marching right to left. The blue reflectors made a line you could sew into a night with a steady hand. He passed under the canopy and into the shift. On his left, the emptier lanes stretched away, closed, their overhead reds on and unwavering. On his right, a narrow concrete barrier separated him from the edge drop into the soft outskirts of the river. Another voice joined the advisory, warmer and almost conversational, under the main one, the way the ground sometimes hums under a radio tower. Lane 5, you're centered. You're good. Noise from the grating will increase at the seam. Do not correct for it. Maintain 25. He heard it, felt a strange familiarity, then made a choice to treat it as a staffed night. Plenty of work crews still used old mics plugged into old speakers and turnout boxes. If he looked, he would see an equipment trailer parked on a shoulder, a generator purring, someone in a vest, their breath blown white in the damp. He kept his eyes forward and hands easy. Midway to the crossover's far end, he saw headlights ahead in the band of closed lanes, a set of two, low and slightly yellow, traveling at a dignified pace parallel to his path, but not in his lane. His brain wanted to match it, the human thing where two moving lights become one pair to meet or follow. He let the blue reflectors have his attention instead. The advisory voice, as if hearing a thought, came in again. Vehicles on closed lane are for construction. Do not pace vehicles on closed lane. Continue. The lights passed him opposite, and for a second, through the cross bracing, he thought he could see the vehicle they belonged to: round fenders, squared hood, the shape of a state maintenance pickup from a photograph on a wall. It was enough for a heartbeat's curiosity, not enough to take his right foot off its steady work. The crossover ended with a tap of vibration under his steer tires, a joint between old pavement and newer. A flagger stood ahead in reflective gear, the kind that looks like it throws back a star. He held a paddle, the old stop divided by slow kind, and the word toward Malik faced slow. The flagger's other hand held a baton glowing softly, not the hard orange of a traffic cone, but a quieter green-like glass that remembers sunlight. The baton dipped and pointed. Keep going, you're good. Malik rolled past at 25. The flagger's face was unseen beneath a brim and a hood. The radio agreed with the paddle, keeping the world coherent. Continue through. After the barrier ends, maintain lane. Do not enter Service Plaza right. Vine Orchard is closed overnight. He knew Vine Orchard. It had been in every pocket map and rest stop poster for decades. A plaza with a low roof, and the best cinnamon rolls on a stretch, where night got long. A renovation had closed it last year, then a budget thing had delayed the reopening. The authority had promised a new building with big windows. He had not seen it yet. He knew the ramp would look inviting. He was fond of good turns that took weight off a driver's mind. He passed it anyway, obeying the advisory, feeling the pull of a habit and ignoring it like a person laughs quietly and sets a cookie back in the jar. Behind him, the toll plaza shrank, then slipped behind a low fold in the land. The rain returned lightly, a whisper, sweeping across the hood and away toward the concrete median like someone brushing crumbs off a table. The highway widened again. Cones ended. Normal life pushed back into the edges of his vision. Reflector posts, mile markers, the glow domes of small towns tucked along the river's bends. He checked the time. His dash said 3:27. The slip on the dash said 3. 19 inches a typeface that belonged to clipboards and 3-ply forms. He let the math go. Nothing in the job depended on which clock had been told the truth by which machine. Deliveries respected windows and safety practices, not moments. At the old ferry service area, farther up, he pulled into the truck side to stretch his legs and fetch hot water to top his thermos. The plaza interior looked newer, the sort of bright signage and polished floors that made early mornings tolerable. Inside, a frame of black and white photos hung near the restrooms. One showed the old Orchard Plaza in the 1000 970 seconds, booth attendants in peaked caps, an exact change lane with a little sign that read 1.25 inches of font that nodded to the past even when it was new. Another photo showed a work crew on the Hamlin Causeway, men in jackets posing with a line of barrels and a hand-lettered sign. Single. Lane 2. Way traffic use caution. He sipped hot water and leaned at a polite angle where he wouldn't block foot traffic. The person at the counter, their nameplate reading DEE, saw him glance at the photos. "You came through Old Orchard tonight?" they asked, not in a way that implied a story, just conversation. "Exact. Change lanes were open," he said. "Transit said the transponders were down." Dee reached under the counter and brought up a small laminated card. The authority logo sat in the corner, this time the modern one. The card listed emergency procedures. "We had a local outage earlier," Dee said. "South side. It should have cleared by an hour ago, but those old plazas, they live their own lives sometimes. Everything work out?" He nodded. "Easy going. Crossover on the causeway. Flagger with a slow sign, baton glow." Dee's smile tightened in recognition. "That crossover again. They patch and patch. If only anyone would let them shut it once and fix it proper." They tucked the card away. "You be careful up there. Fog likes the upper stretch." Back at the rig, he checked the seal, walked around the trailer, felt each tire with the back of his hand, the way his first boss taught him a little ritual that felt like checking a horse before a ride. Everything steady. He slid the booth slip under the clip on his dash, behind his insurance card and his fuel receipts. The road beyond Old Ferry behaved. A patch of ground fog went from silver to nothing under his bumper and back again in his mirrors, and he didn't give it the satisfaction of more attention. He rolled into that part of the night where time softens and miles become a generous thing, late enough to belong to the road, early enough that dawn made a promise. A few exits later, the radio gave 3 soft beeps. He thumbed the advisory frequency. "Update," the calm voice said. "Construction equipment remains parked on the right shoulder before Hamlin. No workers present. Temporary lighting will cycle off at 0400. If your route includes Vine Orchard, be advised its water lines are under test, no services. Next, plaza open. Drive with care." It pleased him more than it should to hear a voice keeping a running list in the dark. There was a sweetness in thinking someone watched over a stretch of road that old. His grandmother used to say some jobs feel like tending a light on a point, simple, consistent, done for others. He liked that image of a person in a small room, windows on all sides, polishing the glass. He delivered in the river county with the grace of quiet docks, early crews, and the comfort of a signature offered by a person with a friendly pen. He slept during a tidy bright of morning behind a grocery warehouse where birds kept their own shift change. Afternoon took him to another load, then evening rolled back, ready for the southbound. At sundown, he found a spot in a day room of a larger service plaza and drank coffee like evening's anchor. A maintenance poster caught his eye. Toll Plaza. Modernization project. Old Orchard Plaza status. Demolished new canopy 2022. A diagram showed where the booths had stood and where the new would go. The old exact change cup icon sat in the corner next to a caption. Retired. He stood there a minute longer while his mind did a bend it didn't do during work. He took the slip from the morning out of his pocket and looked at the logo. The wreath was crisp, the ink not yet faded. He turned it over. On the back, a short line of fine print gave a number for Highway Advisory Radio, 1610 AM. The print had a kind of pressure to it newer slips didn't. He smiled, folded it, and put it back. On the way south, he expected nothing unusual. The night had switched weather. No rain, just air cool enough to make his window a good idea to crack an inch. He came to the place where the causeway lay, and the advisory frequency loaded without him touching it. The voice offered nothing dramatic. Reduced speed advisory lifted. Construction materials remain staged behind barrier. Use care when passing slow-moving maintenance vehicles. He passed the spot where he had seen the yellow headlights in the closed lane. The barrier had new scuffs as if something had leaned on it gently in the last rain, but nothing more. The Hamlin water lay flat, a sheet of ink. The new plaza canopy loomed where the olds had lived, framework up, skinned but unlit, lanes taped and wrapped in orange. He rolled, kept to 45, felt the rig like a careful sentence building itself. The new gates at Old Orchard were in service. Their blue signs had crisp fonts and a note about cash being exact to avoid delays. Lane 5's canopy lights were LED bright. Still, as he coasted in, a different light rose from the far edge of the lot, the old canopy shape in silhouette, superimposed in his mind, or maybe in the way his windshield collected reflections. The exact change cup glowed in his memory with a soft halo. The intercom in his cab clicked, a vestigial beep from nothing he had turned on. In that tiny pause, a voice said, as if finishing something it had started a long time ago, "You're through. Keep it steady." He rolled the last length, used his transponder as always, and let the gate lift. It did, cleanly, with no help from coins or voices. The radio settled into normal traffic updates. A note about a minor fender bender near a commuter exit, the kind that clears by the time someone mentions it. The night went on with its usual grace. Curiosity, that quiet companion, asked the question he knew would offer a complicated answer. He took the old slip and, at the next plaza, showed it to a district officer in a glass-walled office by the info desk, a person whose shirt carried the small name of the authority and the larger weight of being asked odd things on night shift. She examined it with a practiced eye and smiled a little. "We did use this crest. Long time ago. Funny, the printer ink sometimes brings up the wrong date when you run legacy equipment on reset. The computer thinks it's back when it was last used. Our shop uses a few old units to test sensors when the new ones hiccup. If a rain knocks power, they wake up sometimes and talk. Doesn't hurt anything. Your advisory told me not to take the Vine Orchard ramp," he said. "We closed it at 8 p.m. for pressure tests," she said without blinking. "Saved you a disappointment." She slid the slip back. Turnpikes like any city. Things go down, things come up, and the fellows who know where the wires run keep it all moving while the rest of us sleep. He let that be the story. It was a good one. It belonged to a world that needed dazzlement less than it needed competence. He drove on. The paper rolls rode quiet as obedient boulders. The causeway's low rail held the water in a ribbon beside him. The night made it sound of distant tires and closer engines, that kind of white noise drivers get fond of. He tuned to the CBC for a while, classical music at low volume, strings that matched the line of the road like a chalk line snapped and lifted. At dawn, when he stopped to stretch near a county line, he found a penny on the ground by his step, the old kind, darker, a wheat stalk on one side. He laughed a small laugh no one heard, and slipped it into the coin cup, where quarters clinked and low denominations made their quiet life. He didn't need it to explain anything. Coins are everywhere that humans are, especially near places where machines ask for them. Still, he liked the thought that the road sometimes paid a driver back for exact change, not in value, but in neatness. He thought of the blue reflectors guiding him like a rope through dark water. He thought of the flagger's paddle, the single word turned toward him. He thought of the advisory voice saying the causeway like a person might say a place in a letter, a place that needs the right word to behave. He added a shorter rule to his mental list. A list that included 1,000-foot checks, easy steering, no sudden decisions at dawn. Respect the old wires. When something speaks in the middle of the night, and the speaking keeps you steady, you accept the help and give it back later to whoever asks in return. Some weeks later, in a daylight so bright it bleached signs, he passed the place again. The new plaza was open, polished. Scanners blinking in neat agreement. Behind the utility yard fence sat an old booth, retired to a corner, greenish paint faded, glass still surprisingly clear. A worker had set a traffic wand in its window, a prop, a joke, or a memory. The wand's plastic was sun-chalked. It could not glow anymore. But for a moment, as sunlight hit it through the last of the morning haze, it seemed to catch a greener note than the day offered. A trick of physics, a trick of mind. He lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in a small hello and kept going. The turnpike ran on. The night waited for other drivers. The paper rolls found their next homes, becoming printed circles of news or paper bags or handbills for events with dates most would forget. The road didn't mind being forgotten. It minded being misused. People had kept it carefully through storms and budgets and years. Some of those people had voices that found a way to ride the old lines and remind a driver to carry 35 through a low place, to skip a ramp with a promise and a closed door at its top, to trust a line of blue dots that held its bite even when the water pulled at the edges of a steady mind. And in that, Malik found something like courage, which on the road often looks exactly like restraint. As the last story fades into the night, remember some roads keep their secrets buried deep beneath the asphalt. The echoes we've heard tonight still travel through the dark, following the hum of passing engines and the whispers of the wind. If you've stayed with us till the end, you're one of the few who can face what hides beyond the headlights. Don't forget to like this video, share your city and the time you're listening in the comments, and subscribe to The Sleep Haunt, where every night brings another haunting mile. Sleep well, if you can.